Welcome back to the Kelowna Real Estate Podcast. I'm your mortgage broker host, Taylor Atkinson.
And I'm your real estate agent host, Matt Glenn. What's happening today, Taylor?
Yeah, just wanted to touch on that McKay Grove project by Audeo again out in Peachland. Matt and I are going to try and jump out to that event November 23rd. That's 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Buchanan Road. And you better not even enter for that $500 gift card from Martin's Lane because I'm going for that for sure.
You versus me, bro. We're both going for it.
But yeah, if you guys want to register, go to mckaygrove.ca. Yeah, they obviously have a website. Follow them on Instagram, reach out to them, let them know you're coming. Obviously try and get a head count, but yeah, it's McKay Lane Development. Yeah, really cool project.
Yeah, they're like really nice townhome project there. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. And on today's show, we had a couple awesome Ryans. Ryan Wyse and Ryan Berlin from Rennie. So Rennie is a fairly robust real estate brokerage, mostly based out of Vancouver, but they seem like they're starting to grow and they are up in the Kelowna market as well. So yeah, we kind of spoke to them on macro, micro, provincial, federally, like pretty much about everything.
Yeah, because they have an intelligence department.
Yeah, I love that, man. Like, I'm going to give myself my own intelligence department. I felt like I was talking to the CIA.
Yeah. I'm your intelligence department, dude.
Oh, we're all in trouble. I thought that was so cool. Like, this is the very beginning of the show. And they're like, yeah, this is the intelligence department. We are, integral part of the brokerage, which to me, like at the time, it seemed so, I don't know, foreign to be like, wow, an intelligence department for a real estate brokerage. But then as we started talking to them, like, should every brokerage not have this? Like, otherwise it just leaves the work to, a bunch of real estate agents trying to plug numbers around, which, we know isn't great. So I think this could be the way of the future. They're leading the way.
Yeah, I think they have the right idea. It's pretty cool what they got going on. Also, super fun talking to both Ryans, Ryan Berlin and Ryan Wyse. That was fun to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. I would suggest out of anything, listen to the show. It's a great show, but definitely, follow them on, well, apparently they're on TikTok now as well, but LinkedIn is where they put out a lot of really good reports. I think they have a newsletter as well that they send out information and even things like, lakefront property in the Okanagan. Like they are really diving into the super, super nitty gritty specific data. So yeah, a value add for anyone that's looking at buying or selling in the near future is dive into their info.
Definitely. This episode, like every episode, is sponsored by Century 21 Assurance Realty, best brokerage in Kelowna. Probably the best brokerage in the interior since we're growing so much. We're now in Kamloops, Vernon, Kootenays, Shuswap. If you need an agent in any of those areas or you are an agent looking for a new brokerage, give us a call. Love to talk to you about it and see what we can do for you.
Sounds great. Enjoy the show, guys. All right, Ryan and Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here, guys.
Who's who, so the listener can tell when they're listening.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Ryan Wyse, Rennie's Market Intelligence Manager and Lead Analyst.
Nice.
So I'm Ryan Berlin. I head up our intelligence group, and I'm our head economist. So if we can go by last names here if you want. If that's easier, we can go Berlin and Wyse.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That. Okay. Well, Berlin and Wyse, I'll leave you guys to want, who's going to take this first, but we kind of like to start our show with just you connecting with our listener in terms of what's your perfect Friday look like? What gives you productivity, work-wise, and then leading into the fun for the weekend?
Sure, I'll jump in. I actually have a Friday theory that I kind of tell anyone who's willing to listen. And it relates to sort of the hybrid work environment. So I think that most people seem to work from home Fridays. That's like the most popular day. There's like not a lot of traffic on the roads or anything like that. But I think Mondays and Fridays are the two best days to be in the office. And for me, it's all about those conversations that you don't have the rest of the week that can really lead you into sort of the creative sort of aha moments. I find we get a lot more done on new innovative things on Fridays. So my favorite thing is get up early, drop the kids off, get into the office and kind of collaborate with our team or with other people in the office. Because I find those really cool steps forward always happen on Fridays.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Fridays are great for that kind of thing. My Friday starts the same as all other days during the week. I try to get up at 5 every day to work out, jump on the Peloton, throw back a couple of decaf coffees, make the kids lunches. It's a very exciting life I lead. Get them out the door for school. So that kind of thing. When the mornings are pretty full. Once I get in the office, yeah, I mean, I look forward to those conversations on Friday as well. Get sort of your brain turning and sets the stage for the next week. I try not to schedule meetings on Fridays. I don't have to, just kind of keep the decks clear so that loose ends can be tied up and you kind of get organized for the week ahead. Yeah, so that's it. And then weekends are just filled with family stuff and kid stuff and lots of pizza. So that's about it.
Nice. That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, Friday pizzas days are ideal.
Can you guys just give us like a high level company summary for Rennie? I think you've come up to Kelowna fairly recently, but obviously you're more well known in the Lower Mainland. Yeah, can you just kind of give us the elevator pitch on company?
Sure. We're a real estate services company, technically been around for 40 plus years, but started with our founder, Bob Rennie. We're now a company of 160 full-time staff at our head office. And we've got over 300 agents, advisors, realtors, whatever you want to call them. And we operate in a few different spaces in the real estate sector. So first and foremost, we are both a brokerage, a traditional brokerage that operates largely in resale, but also in the new home market. But then we also have a pre-sale marketing and sales division as well as an advisory function. Ryan and I are both within the intelligence division. We support the operations of the business from the perspective of trying to understand the market, doing our best to understand the market, what's impacting it, where things are going, so that we can help our clients better understand the markets that they're designing product for, launching into, to help our advisors who are working with buyers or sellers, often in the resale space, but also in the pre-sale space, just to understand what kind of a commitment they're making to either sell or to buy. So we're very much a data-driven company. Operate primarily out of Vancouver. That's where our head office is. But as you said, we've been in Kelowna now for, honestly, it's been about a year and a half. We haven't really grown our presence a lot there, but we do have an office and we have a few agents up there. We also are in Victoria, and we've recently this year expanded into Seattle and Palm Springs.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Cool.
Forgive my ignorance. Do most brokerages have an intelligence sector? Like, it seems to me like a huge value add for employees and clients, but yeah, is this a bit of a niche for the industry?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. So Berlin, you came on with Andy Ramlow how many years ago to kind of start this up?
So intelligence became a thing at Rennie 8 years ago. You don't see it in this sector. It's kind of a unique function. Well, I've talked to other people at other brokerages and development companies. They're looking at should we have an intelligence function? It's one of those things where you really have to value what an intelligence group brings to the table, what sort of the researchers and the analysts bring to the table. Everybody likes understanding the market. Everyone likes data. But I think what's different here at Rennie is that when Chris Rennie, who is our CEO, when he sort of took over day-to-day operations of the business 8-9 years ago, he really wanted to have that function in-house. And he believed that it set up the company for a sustainable, successful existence over the longer term to have that kind of function in-house. And he saw it as sort of, being able to meet the needs of our clients consistently going forward. And it's definitely unique. Ultimately, everybody's interested in data. So, you're seeing more and more companies in the real estate space. They may not have a formal intelligence division, but I think we're seeing more and more sort of data-driven decision-making.
I was just going to ask, so when you say intelligence, I'm assuming you mean breaking down data. Where do you get your data? You get it from the real estate boards? You guys find your own? Where do you scrape the data from?
Yeah, so a little bit of everywhere. So definitely we get board data. So we subscribe, we get the live feed, the APIs, so we can break it down in real time, and then also do a lot of different things that maybe, traditionally the boards kind of give you that stats pack, and that's sort of the way that it's always worked. But we like to break things down in a whole bunch of different ways. We don't want to be limited to just the way that, we've always done things a certain way. And so an example of that is we now report on just waterfront homes in Kelowna. That was sort of a thing that all of our advisors said, hey, waterfront's a specific product type. Everything's geared around the lake. And so we, our team went and painstakingly hand drew all these maps. And it's okay, this property here, this is waterfront. This one isn't. They went up and down both sides of the lake. But, it's that sort of thing of hey, what do people actually want? And where is there sort of an opportunity to do things a little bit better? Whether it's with the board data, we use a lot of publicly available data as well. We rely on StatsCan a ton, on CMHC. some of it we pay for, some of it's just freely available. But, we deep dive, we download, the minutia of all of these different data sets. And we have the luxury of getting the time to play in these spaces and hopefully coming up with as many cool insights as we can.
Yeah, well, let's dive into it then. What's 2024 been like in Vancouver, Kelowna, provincially? Like, we hear a lot of stagnant, slow market, subject to sale stuff. But in terms of, I don't know, historically for the last 20 years, what was the year like?
Been tough.
Well put.
Yeah, it's been a tough year. I think, there's no point in beating around the bush.
Yeah.
Sales have been below average in Vancouver, Kelowna, Victoria for more than 2 years now, every single month. So if you look historically where we're at, it's been a below average, sales count. So we want to look at activity. Kelowna's been kind of hit the hardest. Sales have been the most below average in Kelowna. We can talk about some of the reasons why that market's been hit a little bit harder. But I think provincially, everywhere, it's been a really tough year. And it all really comes back to this market has been defined by high interest rates that have been in response to high inflation. And so all the time that I've been in real estate, it's never been about one thing as much as it has been these last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a good characterization. There's been this collision between an unfavorable macroeconomic environment, if you will. Like we've got a pretty slow job market. And as Wyse said, high interest rates have really bogged down the housing market, both from the development side and also from the buyer side. But there's been this collision with also policy in this province that in some instances has been very supportive of or encouraging of new supply, which is great. I think we all know that we need to be expanding our supply of housing consistently over time, especially in response to all of the population growth we've seen over the past few years. But we've also had a lot of policy implemented recently that really targets investors. Think what you will about investors, right? Everyone has an opinion about them. The reality is when it comes to delivering new housing supply, the investor segment of the market's really, really important for developers and for projects to meet their sales thresholds so they become financially viable. They're able to access financing to actually start building. A lot of that demand from the investors has gone away. We're seeing projects that aren't launching because developers are, the risk averse. They're very cautious. They're worried that the project won't be viable, that they won't be able to sell as much as they need to. And then the projects that have come to market, you're just seeing slower absorption because, in Metro Vancouver, according to our own data and projects that we've sold, between 2021 and 2023, investors accounted for about half of all pre-sale purchases. Through the first half of this year, they've accounted for about a quarter. And it makes sense. I mean, the cash flow situation for investors, if you're buying new, even with higher rents, it's pretty ugly. Your monthly cash flow is going to be negative for a number of years, at least. So those policies, I think that like we're talking about the increase in the capital gains inclusion rate at the federal level, the restrictions on short-term rentals, changes to the Residential Tenancy Act, which come from a very good place, but all sort of restrict or constrain investors' ability to participate by changing that risk-reward relationship. And we have a flipping tax, which I think is set to be implemented in the new year. So it's been a lot of things. It's kind of been a lot of things all at once, right? It's really slowed things down.
I guess in a perfect world, Matt and I have spoken a lot about policy changes. Seems like every other week there's news coming out with something, and then 2 weeks go by and then they change the policy because it's not correct. But I guess from economic standpoint, what is the perfect scenario if we could build one for appreciation in those properties? Like obviously we don't want the market just to crash and the bottom to fall out of it, and we do understand that provincially they want affordable houses, but like what is the perfect balance? I guess should properties be appreciating by 3 to 5% every year? Or
there is no magic number. I think if we want to get away from sort of the commodification of housing, then we shouldn't be trying to build a system that bakes in home price increases that are exceeding the ability of the population to pay. So what is that? Is that 2% a year, 3% a year, something like that? I think at the end of the day, if you get away from the value part of things, I mean, obviously we want housing to be affordable, but I think before we talk about that, it's really about how do you set the conditions such that regardless of, let's say, the macroeconomic environment, how do we ensure that we have this consistent flow of new housing to the extent that we need it, to the extent that our population continues to grow and we need more housing? I think that's the most important thing. So supportive supply side measures are great, but I think looking on the other side too and implementing policies that say, hey, we have some empty homes and we think those should be filled up. So we're introducing certain policies to do that. Well, they have a knock-on effect because they dissuade some of the catalysts for new supply from participating in the market. It's not reacting to the zeitgeist, right? It's more just like it's thinking long-term, which politicians aren't good at. They get it.
Yeah, it doesn't get you voted back in if you're thinking long-term, does it?
Yeah, and I would add that, depending on which analysis you look at, like we've been underbuilding in this country and in this province for decades. So like CMHC has a report that in Canada, we should build 3.5 million more homes than we otherwise would build by 2030 just to get affordability levels back to 2003. We did a recent analysis at metro levels where we said, based on household formation, that we've probably underbuilt in Metro Vancouver by about 45,000 homes. In the Okanagan, it's a little over 2,000 homes. Like these are big numbers in terms of the amount of homes that we've been consistently underbuilding year after year after year. And so I think, most of that, back to your question of like, what's the best case scenario? I think it's all about encouraging more housing supply because we don't just need to build for, recent population growth. We need to sort of make up that gap that we've been accumulating over the last few decades.
Yeah, it's funny. So let's just say there's been like 20 some odd policies in the last couple of years that have come out to try and resolve this supply and demand issue. And everyone keeps going back to just like, we need to build more. But I guess, federally, they finally come to the conclusion that maybe the easier solution is, hey, maybe our population needs to stop growing as fast, or like, hindsight's 2020. Hey, 3 years ago, maybe we shouldn't have, encouraged population growth so much. So with recent government policy around immigration and population growth, do you see that being the easiest solution out of everything that they've come out with? And they've tried everything else and everything else hasn't worked. So finally they're like, okay, this is a step we need to take.
I mean, I would say, stopping immigration or reducing population for a couple of years isn't going to solve these long-term systemic issues. This recent announcement for immigration, where we're effectively saying we're going to see population decline for the next 2 years, is something we've never seen before in Canada. But we've also never seen the level of population growth we saw for the last 2 years, where we added more than 2 million Canadians in a 2-year period. So it's this crazy whiplash between one extreme to the next. We went back and looked all the way to Confederation. We've never had a single year of population decline in this country. And now they say, oh, let's go ahead and do 2, and maybe that'll fix housing and healthcare. And like, you're not going to fix housing and healthcare in 2 years. I'm sorry to be a little bit flippant about that, but like, we need sustained immigration for our economy. We have an aging population. We have an aging workforce. We need that sort of immigration level that we had pre-pandemic or somewhere around there, like, 1% annual growth rate for population. And so it seems like so many of these policies are, again, they're short-term thinking. It's responding to the latest challenge with the next policy that you don't fully consider all of the unintended consequences of it. And I expect that with population decline over the next year or two, we're going to see real pains in the economy, and in particular in the labor market, that will lead to more policy changes.
I think there's danger in, fostering an environment of, policy or economic uncertainty and unpredictable volatility, right? And so that's what we're looking at. And we just came through this with COVID. Like, we're coming up on 5 years of this and that. Everything is unprecedented, right? And it's exhausting. And we're just coming out of that period. And now on the policy front, we're back talking about unprecedented changes to immigration and migration flows and population growth. As Wyse said, we're going to see 2 years of population decline. From a business perspective, even from an individual perspective, if we have these dramatic shifts in policy, like how we're trying to solve the challenges that we have, it becomes a not very enticing environment for people to participate in. It can paralyze the economy from the viewpoint of investment. And whether it's like financial investment or human capital investment in an economy. So the permanent resident targets have been reduced, up until the announcement, what was it, a month ago now, a few weeks ago? For next year and the year after, we were expecting 500 PR admissions to this country. And that's now down to I think 395 and then 380, and then another year after that at 365. That's kind of understandable. That is a big downshift. It is. But you go, okay, well, maybe we sort of taper it off. At the same time, they've put caps on the number of temporary residents that they would like to see in Canada. So international students, temporary foreign workers, and that sort of thing. That's what's really going to drive our growth rate down, is pushing out each of the next 2 years 500,000 people. It's a powerful tool, but I think we should wield it, carefully.
Yeah. I mean, we spoke a lot about like volatility with policy changes. With the provincial election over, which seems like it went on forever because counting ballots, like it's the weirdest election ever. Now that that's over, obviously federally, there'll be one coming up pretty quickly here. Like, I feel like you're more in tune with it being, in a bigger city and, obviously studying this stuff, but can we expect less volatility and less policy changes now that like the political campaign is done provincially? Like, yeah, there's obviously still going to be some, federally, but can we all like take a sigh of relief and be like, we should be in the clear for the next year to just like not have to watch the news every day?
I think so. I think this government will focus more on all of these policy changes they've begun to implement. They're still trying to get some of them through, whether it's housing targets, getting all the municipalities on board, or implementing some of that multiplex zoning across the province where there's been some pushback. So I think we're going to see more of that implementation of that agenda that they campaigned on, that they started on previously. So I would say probably, I think so. But there are still, I think, some more to come. Like Berlin already mentioned, the flipping taxes to come into effect. They talked about increasing the spec and vacancy tax rate. So that's still probably to come. Like, there are still probably some more changes, but overall, I think they're going to focus more on implementing their agenda that they've already kind of spoken to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe to spin this a little more optimistically, I'm hoping, how's 2025 shaping up to be? Like, it seems like the market's gaining some momentum, like even in Kelowna, where the fall winter is usually a slower season, it seems like activity is starting to pick up. What are you guys seeing?
I mean, I think broadly, and then drill down to Kelowna, we've been saying that 2025 is going to be average,
which is up from now.
Well, exactly. Yeah. It's not necessarily solid on the surface, like something to get excited about, but because we've been distinctly below average in so many regards for the past couple of years, to the extent that we are average from the perspective of, inventory sort of leveling out and stabilizing, sales increasing, a more liquid market, right? Because what we right now, we have like almost paralysis in our market on both the listing side and the buy side. I think with more stability in inflation, I mean, we've been sub 2% as far as headline inflation is concerned the last two readings. I think from our perspective, the Bank of Canada has got inflation under control in the near term. I hope those words don't come back to haunt me. But our outlook is for inflation to remain in that 1% to 3% band over the coming year, which then gives the Bank of Canada space to bring down interest rates to a, what they call a neutral level. So that overnight rate being between 2.25 and 3.25. So, we're probably going to see 5-year fixed mortgage rates for uninsured mortgages around, 4%, but you might be able to get a little bit lower than that. I mean, you guys might be able to speak to that as well. The point is not the level of these things, but more that there's stability in those elements, which then give confidence to developers to sort of commit to purchasing land and financing projects and actually bringing them to market, knowing that there's probably going to be buyers out there. And I think on that side of things, we expect sales both in resale and pre-sale to move back to sort of the historical average, not to exceed it, but move back to that average, which would represent, a welcome change, I think, for everybody. And without seeing dramatic changes in values. Like housing, we expect over the next 6 to 12 months is going to become more affordable. It's still going to be very expensive, but with continued modest increases in incomes, falling interest rates, and prices not really ticking up too much, we think we can see increased activity in the market without seeing values really pushed upwards.
Sorry, when you mean average, I think for an economist to say that, it's pretty optimistic, or maybe I'm just putting your words in my mouth, but like average in terms of, I think last year, or maybe even partial of this year, like the Okanagan market, we were down on sales like 16% from the previous year, which was like pretty low. But do you mean average in terms of like, over the past 10 years, we're kind of be back on track average wise? So it should be like a fairly strong market in terms of transactions.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I think we've already seen some movement back towards average, again, in Vancouver and Victoria. Those two markets have started to move first already. And again, Kelowna's been hit a little bit harder. And I think a lot of that is, again, investor and recreational buyers maybe being squeezed out a little more on some of that policy stuff, especially like the short-term rental restrictions, I think have impacted Kelowna more than any other market. So maybe not quite to the same level, again, as Vancouver and Victoria, but ultimately, yeah, like back to a kind of a past decade average or close to that level. So, I think we would expect things will feel a lot different next year because there will be a lot more transactions happening. And without a lot of price growth, I think there'll be, a bit more value for those buyers as rates continue to come down.
What do you think about the recreational market in Kelowna, even long term? Like, can you even have a recreational property right now? Like, besides Big White, you got vacancy tax. You can't Airbnb it.
I'll show you. I was prepping for this. I printed the map. So green, you are subject to spec and vacancy tax.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah, it's tough. I'd say, go buy a shoe shop instead.
Because that's where you own, right?
Yeah, that's right. Our family's got a place there. A little shameless plug. Yeah, no, it's tough. Like even, you said Big White, even Predator Ridge is subject to spec and vacancy tax.
I know.
Which I find a little bit strange. So there's some pockets, but I think that recreation buyer, like it's going to be tough for a while. And we went back and we tried to measure this using a per capita sales analysis. And so Kelowna or the Central Okanagan typically sees about 25% more transactions per capita than other markets in BC. And we attribute that a mix of sort of investor, but especially that rec buyer. And that 25% declined a lot last year and is basically on par with other markets this year. And I think we're going to see that rec buyer kind of be sidelined for a little bit longer until we get a bit more sense for what the long-term impacts of some of these policies
are. Like even longer, like as long as the speculation tax is there, seems like this has never come back.
Yeah, and I think like also with the short-term rental restrictions, like some of those buyers are, I want to use it some of the time. I want to put it on Airbnb some of the time, especially on some of those, those condos at sort of downtown Kelowna before some of the zoning rules changed. But those buyers, they're sidelined right now for sure.
Collectively, I don't think we should hold our breaths for any reductions or removals in the speculation and vacancy tax. And I think, Wyse, you mentioned that this government is looking at increasing that actually in the near term. I think there's some potential for those short-term rental restrictions. There's a couple layers to it, but for the short-term rental restrictions to be scaled back, there's issues because you have the policy at the provincial level, but then you also have municipalities that are also keen in certain instances to have some form of it. I'm optimistic that we give it a little bit more time, we'll have the benefit of being able to look back on the data and say, okay, what was the impact of the short-term rental restrictions? We know StatsCan did a study that showed that the short-term rentals as a share of the dwelling stock, it's very small. We're talking like 2 to 3%.
Yeah, a little bit higher in Kelowna, but like nationally, I think like really, really low.
And even in the city of Vancouver, I think it's only 2.8%. So yeah, it is a bit higher in Kelowna, but within that, there's only a fraction of those that are actually suitable for long-term occupancy because there's all kinds of forms of short-term rentals, like rooms and tents and caravans and all these things, right? So the immediate impact of these restrictions is kind of flood the market, impact rental markets, to impact the for sale market because you have investors now that, relied on that cash flow and now need to sell. But long term, again, this is not a solution to the lack of availability in housing. And I think there's probably a balance, especially for markets like Kelowna, where it's, the tourism dollar matters a lot there. And if you remove the short-term rentals completely, well, you're now having a profound economic impact. So I'm hopeful. I know nothing, but I'm hopeful that maybe we'll see.
That's why you had us on, right?
Yeah. That's still more than Matt and I.
Yeah. I just want to add, like the leverage on the hotel stock is so much bigger. Like there's 4,500 hotel rooms in Kelowna. It's a much smaller sort of base. So when you start taking things out of the accommodation side on the tourism, like the impact is so much greater on tourism, and you guys would know this better than us, but like looking at hotel rooms in Kelowna, you can't find anything for under $500 a night right
now.
We've spoken about this a bunch on the show. It's not an easy issue to talk about, and there is no easy solution, but you hit the nail on the head when it's like, okay, you remove that Airbnb stock or the investor appetite because the numbers just don't pencil out now. Well, that does trickle down to the effect where the people that are now earning income based on tourism at restaurants or, wineries or anything that were built from in this economy, now their income's getting less. So now they can't afford those units, even if they come on the market or rent does lower. So yeah, you got to have a bit of a balance. And I think what they did, last year or this year, I guess, was just wipe it out with a blanket, and it should be a bit more specific. So yeah, hopefully we see that to be reanalyzed in the future. But what do you see in asset class right now that's maybe undervalued with a lot of these policy changes? Like, with a lot of volatility and difficult times, there's always like an opportunity somewhere. Like in Kelowna, it seems like we have a lot of condos coming on the market, a lot of purpose-built rentals.
Mm-hmm.
With densification, right, provincially where we're at, and Kelowna's really supported densification. Even analyzing those properties, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to tear down $1 million house and build a fourplex. Are you guys seeing more of that in Vancouver? Like, obviously Vancouver's been leading the way on this as well.
We've seen a bit more. I think on the multiplex side, it's still pretty early days. There are applications. We haven't seen a lot of uptick just because of how recent policy changes. But if you go back a little bit further, they did duplex zoning in the city of Vancouver. We've actually seen it to a point now we can track half duplex sales because there's so many of them in the city of Vancouver that this is now like an asset class that exists. And it's priced kind of where you would expect. It's a little more expensive than a townhome, a little cheaper than a detached home. And I think probably 5 years, 10 years down the road, that's sort of where multiplex kind of fits in. But to your point about sort of penciling the numbers, like if you are in Vancouver and you own a $3 million home, to make the numbers work to buy that lot from, that homeowner, maybe that downsizing boomer, like you still have to make an offer that works for them and then turn around and make all the numbers work on your pro forma. So it's not going to be easy. I don't think there's going to be a massive uptick of these anytime soon, but I think at the margin, as more lots come available, but, not in any huge sort of numbers.
The single family segment, particularly in the lower mainland, the closer you get to sort of the historic core of Metro Vancouver, single family homes, they're always going to be theoretically in demand, as people age and couple up and have kids. There's always going to be demand there, but we have a disappearing stock of detached homes. But we have more detached homes today than we'll have at any point going forward. So like from a value perspective, there's a scarcity of supply feeding into that. And it says to me that, yeah, the value and the redevelopment potential, there's value in that over time. But I think what we need as a region, obviously, is we need more homes built faster. So that points us more to the condo end of the spectrum, the apartment end of the spectrum. But then, that's not for everyone either, right? In some ways, we're building those to meet the needs of today. But the question is, as the city evolves and our market maybe at some point starts to stabilize and growth stabilizes, do we have the right mix of housing? So I think in order to achieve that, we got to be investing in everything today. And I think, there's a huge opportunity from a demand perspective in that sort of middle housing space. As you said, Wyse, as we're calling you today, duplexes, townhomes that are suitable to downsizers and move uppers. They have a bit more space so you can comfortably live as a family as well. It's a tough one because it doesn't always pencil. And obviously, municipalities and developers right now are both pushing for more and more density. But I think we need to sort of try to balance out the supply that is coming across the spectrum.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the share of housing stock, whether it's in Kelowna, Vancouver, Victoria, we've decreased the share of detached homes, we've increased the share of condos, and townhomes have stayed almost completely constant over the last couple of decades in all three markets. We're building a few more townhomes, but not as a share of our overall housing stock. And so for that, that demand segment of, okay, I can't afford necessarily the big house and the big piece of land, but I want a family-sized home for my growing family. There aren't necessarily more townhome options available today than there were 20 years ago.
So lately, there's been just a ton of purpose-built rentals being built in Kelowna. I imagine Vancouver too, because the for sale market is just not there for them. And I think that CMHC financing is really helping these builders just pump them out. Like, are we just going to end up with way too many rental places around? Or like, what has to change in our market for that to change and for us to start building townhouses or like for sale condos? Like, do we just need something to stabilize? Hopefully 2025 comes out like you guys say, and it's just stable market and we can start seeing these things again. Or are we just going to endlessly build rental projects just because they pencil right now?
I think you're right about part of the reason why we're seeing so many new projects hit the market or being built, but we need it. So in Metro Vancouver, I have the data at my fingertips, so I'll just reference it here. In the 17-year period going back to 2007, 80% of the net growth in the rental condo apartment space was due to growth in the secondary market, right? So it's sort of the individual investor owners that are renting their condo out, as opposed to the purpose-built segment driving that growth. It only accounted for about 20% of the net growth. And up until about 6 or 7 years ago, we literally, for a decade plus, maybe closer to 2 decades, we saw a virtually unchanged stock of purpose-built rentals in this region. It was 1991 to 2016. That's at a 25-year period. Over that period, our purpose-built dwelling stock in Metro Vancouver basically didn't grow, but our population grew by 60%. So we are catching up with this rental construction. It's really needed, especially as we grow as a region, as a province, as a country, because we're not having enough kids. We're not growing because we're having babies. We're growing because people are moving here. And the data show that movers are overwhelmingly renters. And so, you're absolutely right that we need going back to this idea of a range of housing typologies. The rental piece, I think we could see a lot more of it and be okay with it. Like the rental vacancy rate in Metro Vancouver is sub 1%. I mean, it's the latest data. We'll get new data in a couple of months. It's extraordinarily tight. So more of that, but also more middle housing.
As we bring more rental online, hopefully we have fewer of these restrictive policies that tell you what you can and can't do with your property, because we have a healthy vacancy rate. Asking rents are climbing astronomically while, rents of existing tenants fall behind with our sort of current policy. So if we have like a 3% vacancy rate across the province, then we could probably do with a few less of these policies.
So we had Wendy Waters on a couple of weeks ago. She pointed out as well, we had a similar conversation, was like, hey, the Strata Act came out. You could stratify and sell individual units. We kind of went away from those purpose-built rentals because economically it made sense for builders to develop and sell. And now it doesn't really make sense. We're going back because you have a 50-year amortization at insured rates on the MLI Select. A good point you guys raised there is like, vacancy is kind of this taboo word of like, as a investor, you don't want a lot of vacancy. And as the government, you want to balance vacancy, but really as an investor, you do want vacancy because then it allows tenants to move. You don't want a tenant to be in the same property for the next 20 years when they've outgrown it and their rent is from 20 years ago. Like, you want movement. It makes everything better for the market. We sometimes overanalyze and be like, this is what the market needs. And this, but it will balance itself out, and a bit of vacancy is healthy.
Yeah, we have historically low turnover rates in this province, in this country right now. And that's the reason why people don't want to move, because they are enjoying their below market rents. And a lot of them probably can't afford some of the astronomical rents that are out there on the open market.
Okay, well, maybe we should move into kind of our wrap-up questions here. If you could buy a property in the Okanagan in the next 12 months, what would it be?
I think you guys know I'm not buying a vacation home right now, given that I don't want to pay speculation vacancy tax. But I think one opportunity that's there is with leasehold. So you can get an investment property. There's a lot of good options, especially in West Kelowna, where you can get leasehold. It's not subject to all the same restrictions. So you have a little bit more flexibility, but also as an investment property, you get the same rent for a lower door price. Leasehold generally appreciates at about the same amount. So I think there's an interesting opportunity for leasehold availabilities that you don't get with a traditional freehold product. And, with a 99-year lease, like, I don't plan to live that long. So I think I'm good there.
And the new ones are 125 years. So honestly,
I should be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great answer. It really is something that people need to explore more.
And there are some awesome options in West Kelowna for that. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
I'm deferring to Wyse on that. That's a good enough answer for both of us.
Okay. I love
All right. If you could give your 20-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
2 pieces. One is, don't drink on weekdays. You're going to feel so much better if you don't. Learn that lesson eventually. I would tell myself that sort of like, maintain your curiosity and your desire to learn. It'll take you places and it will bring you satisfaction in your personal life and your professional life. I don't want to speak for Wyse, but I know we've talked about it as a group here at Rennie within the intelligence department. Is like, I think the common trait that we all have is we're super curious people, and it's really fun to be curious. I think it's a really, really healthy trait to have. So I'd encourage myself to nurture that.
Good answer.
I would say one thing I didn't realize when I was sort of getting into real estate is like just reach out to people and ask for advice or ask to go to coffee. I always kind of thought when I was younger that, if you just reach out to someone, they'll kind of blow you off. They won't have time for you. But the reality is it's a pretty small industry and people are really generous with their time. And I would say to any young person out there who's trying to get into the business or just out of school or in school is like reach out to people and chances are they'll go for coffee with you and they'll share their experience with you.
Yeah, great answers. What is your favorite charity or how do you give back?
So I have a couple that are near and dear to me. The first is the Greater Vancouver Food Bank. Enjoyed both volunteering there and donating. I've spent some time in their warehouse sorting like huge donations from grocery stores that it's pretty satisfying to see. It can be tough out there, especially nowadays, and kind of see the impact that they have. And the second one being Ronald McDonald House of BC and Yukon. So we're a huge province. We have one children's hospital kind of tucked away in the corner of Metro Vancouver. Child illness can strike anybody. And, some people are just coming from really far away. And so to go there, you've taken groups there and, you cook dinner for the whole house and you kind of see a whole lot of parents kind of wearing their stress on their face, and to know that you can kind of take one little thing off their plate is pretty impactful.
Awesome.
Love it.
For me, the big one more recently has been the World Wildlife Federation. And I was standing in my driveway. My daughter, who at the time was, I think, 9 years old, she was drawing with chalk at my feet. And the stranger came down the driveway and accosted me. And my intention was to blow him off because who is this guy? And he starts doing his spiel about, why it's important to support wildlife and the environment. And as he's talking, I'm still waiting for him to finish so I can say, actually, I'm not interested. I'm thinking about my daughter and the world that she's going to sort of grow into. And I thought, this is a really important moment for me. And I've committed to donating to them on a consistent basis and felt like the right thing to do then. And I'm very happy to be doing that. I think professionally, something I like to do is mentor. So I've been involved over the years in various mentorship programs. And just going back to actually what Wyse was talking about connecting sort of people earlier in their careers with people who are mid or later career, I think it's really important for those connections to happen. And I've really enjoyed, meeting new people through that.
Fantastic. How can Taylor or I or our audience help you? Like, what can we do to support you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in what we have to say or what we're opining on or writing about, there's a few ways that you can sort of access our content. You can go to our website at rennie.com/intelligence. We post all of our monthly publications on the real estate market, including Kelowna. So we have reports for Kelowna, Seattle, Vancouver, and Victoria. Publish those every month. The Rennie Landscape, which goes out every 6 months, and other publications like the Rennie Outlook, which we published at the beginning of the year with predictions for the balance of the year. All that stuff is there, including topical articles. We publish 2 to 3 a week. Rennie Intel on X, you can find us there, and rennie.group on TikTok. Yes, we are on TikTok. I don't know how we do it. I don't know what we're doing there, but we're there.
I don't know. Stuff goes on there. I haven't looked.
Yeah. You guys have been mastering the dances.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then both Berlin and I are on LinkedIn as well. So you can check. We post a bit of stuff, not too much.
Yeah, no, that's where I found you guys. You guys are putting out some quality reports and I love it. So keep up the good work. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Awesome.
Nice.
Okay, well, thanks so much for your time today, guys. Hopefully Vancouver's treating you guys well, and we'll hope to connect with you guys again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks both. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.